Every year, large amounts of students go into management consulting jobs at firms such as McKinsey, BCG, Bain, Oliver Wyman, the Big Four, and so on. But is consulting really worth it? Choosing consulting as a station in your career journey can be both a blessing and a curse. If you go into a consulting career for the wrong reasons, you might lose both money and valuable time on your path to your ambitious dreams. And in this video, I intend to once again level the playing field when it comes to management consulting career considerations. Because not everyone is able to pay for expensive career advisory coachings, and not everyone grows up in a household where parents are able to provide career advice. For sure, I didn't. But if you don't have the discipline to educate yourself about the best career paths to obtain wealth and power, if you don't have the stamina to watch through this whole video where I give you the raw and unbiased facts, if you are now already scrolling through the suggested videos list to get another shot of that sweet dopamine, you simply don't deserve to be successful. It's as easy as that. For everyone that's serious about master planning their career, let's dive into it. In my last long-form video, I explained why consulting is not the perfect career path if you are looking to become massively rich and powerful. You are aiming for becoming the next Steven Schwartzman. By the way, if there's one educational video you should watch on my channel, make it this one. This is literally me talking to my younger self before starting my career about everything one needs to know to become a billionaire. Career building, PE, VC, consulting, everything. Now, why is consulting not the perfect career path on your road to GOAT? There's multiple reasons, one of them being that it's not a participating career. You do not participate in the revenue upside you are creating for the company you work for until very late in your career. But that doesn't mean it's a bad career path. Hell, I started my career in consulting in one of Europe's largest strategy consulting firms. I'm recording this video for a young and ambitious Kevin who wants to conquer the world and is trying to figure out if working in management consulting for a couple of years is a good choice on his career path. To find out, young Kevin needs to understand multiple elements. And this is what we're going to discuss today. First of all, young Kevin needs to get an understanding of all the consulting firms out there and what this industry looks like, because it's a very special industry and it's not an industry like many others that you might be acquainted with. It has a very special dynamic to it. Secondly, we need to understand what you do as a rookie, and not in a way that, you know, these consulting firms are advertising on their fancy websites, but I'll give you the raw and unfiltered truth to that. Next up, what do you learn? So by doing these things, what are you going to learn, and then how do you make the most out of your consulting experience so that you learn the most? Next, young Kevin would like to know what lifestyle you live. And again, we're not going to take a look at, the things that these firms are propagating. We're going to talk about the real stuff that I experienced, the personal stories from my friends who all work in consulting. Next up, what's the pay? Will it make you a freaking GOAT, aka billionaire? What are the exit opportunities? What are the things you can do after a job in consulting? And what are the things you cannot do anymore? You need to be aware of those especially. What are the dangers of management consulting, and what is the criticism out there about management consulting? Something that is not discussed enough, unfortunately. And if you, after all of that, decide, okay, that sounds pretty cool, then how do you get there? What's the required internship and career path to get there from different stages in your life? And lastly, what does the interview process look like? I was watching Hamza. You might have heard about him. He's a young self-improvement guru on YouTube. His video popped up on my feed and I gave them a try, even though I usually only watch 3 types of content on YouTube. The first one is speeches of real titans, such as Schwartzman, Thiel, or David Sachs. The second one is economic discussions, such as the All-In Pot, for example. And thirdly, videos about Roman emperors. But here's the thing, I think Hamza is one of the few gurus that's creating massive positive impact. If we think about net worth as a parameter, Hamza is going to produce many men with above average careers and net worths. Maybe even some millionaires that have been influenced by his videos. And this got me thinking, what am I hoping to achieve by uploading these videos. The truth is, I hope that most of you end up becoming UHNWIs. And if some of you go on to bank 9 or 10 figures net worth, that would make me the happiest man on earth. And the beautiful thing is, I can help you get there by doing what someone like Hamza or other self-improvement gurus cannot do. I can talk to you about industries like consulting, investment banking, or VC and startups in a raw and unfiltered way, because I have worked there myself. From an ambitious megalomaniac to ambitious megalomaniacs. Because let's be honest, these industries are still where the truly big money is being made. But in order to help you achieve your ambitious career goals, we need to go as deep as few YouTubers are willing to. We need to talk for hours, not just short form 5 to 10 minute content, or even worse, TikToks. And we need to go deep on multiple subjects, not just consulting, but also how to get your first liquidity event as a founder, how to play the VC game, how IB, VC and PE careers look like, and much more. And we will in future videos. And why do I do this? I do this because I want you to be successful in business. I'm not going to start giving out gym advice or dating advice anytime soon, although if I did, I mean, let's be honest, it would be quite lit. But if you manage to build a successful career in business and go for your megalomaniacal dreams, that benefits me directly. For example, one of my secret goals is to start a syndicate or fund of our community at some point, so that we can invest in startups and other private market assets together and get richer together. So let's jump into management consulting, shall we? Is management consulting worth it? The complete course. Now I will make this thing available to you somehow, so you'll be able to download it. So we will skip about all these things about Kevin John. I think most of you know me. Now, is management consulting worth it? We already looked at this, what we'll discuss, so we'll also skip this. Let's get right into it. The most important consulting firms and an industry overview. And I want to be super raw, you know, I mean, you can read about all of these things if you Google them for 5 minutes, but I'll give you my personal war stories on top of that, okay? So if you're thinking about starting a career in consulting, you need to be aware of 4 types of consulting firms. First one is MBB plus, second one Big Four, then we have lower tier boutiques, and we have IT consulting. Now MBB plus is the absolute S tier, okay? That's the silverback gorillas, the Bateman tier. That's what we're aiming for. That's where you really get to do things like talk to senior management, maybe even C-suite. You get to think about strategic big picture projects. You get to travel a lot and all of the, although okay, travel might have decreased the past couple of months due to COVID, but that's generally what you're aiming for. Now, why is it MBB plus? MBB plus, to be honest, is a acronym that I invented a couple of years ago. MBB, as some of you know, stands for McKinsey, BCG and Bain. But then there's other firms like Oliver Wyman, like A.T. Kearney, like in Europe, Roland Berger, that directly compete with these firms for projects. That means if you work at, let's say, Oliver Wyman in Germany, the difference between what you do at Oliver Wyman and at Bain will be minimal, okay? These firms all compete for the same projects. They roughly cost the same, so they have the same budgets, the same rate structures. And they poach people from each other, okay? So partners from Bain might switch to A.T. Kearney and vice versa. So there's not much difference between these firms, although MBB nevertheless still has a very prestigious sound to it, okay? So McKinsey, BCG, Bain is kind of on an even higher pedestal. Now we're gonna talk more about what you do there, what's the bullshit that you're going to do, what's the nice stuff you're going to do, and the criticism about MBB plus and so on, and how it can kind of lead you into the wrong career direction. But for now, that's all you need to know. Big Four. There's a lot of there's a lot of people out there pretending like any job in Big Four is as good as working for MBB Plus. Let me tell you one thing, that's absolute bullshit. The reason why you have this sentiment is because a lot of freaking people work at Big Four, and a lot of freaking influencers who work at Big Four suddenly started talking about Big Four and how it's, the greatest job on earth. It's not. Look at the freaking salaries, okay? A Big Four advisory job is not really comparable with what you're going to do at MBB Plus. You look at the salary structure in Germany. At MBB Plus, you will earn 2 times, sometimes 3 times as much for entry-level positions than you earn at Big Four advisory, taxation, and accounting positions. Now, let that sink in, right? It's 3 times, sometimes 3 times as much. No way on earth these jobs are anywhere the same. Now, what you can give Big Four is that it has a bright future, and it has in the past couple of years already improved a lot. That's because these firms are rich as hell, okay? So Big Four firms have huge budgets, they have a lot of cash laying around, and what they're doing is they're buying up firms. So they are buying up smaller, sometimes mid-sized, sometimes large strategy consulting firms. And if you happen to work in one of those, for example, Monitor Deloitte, yeah, that's totally comparable with MBB Plus, okay? So working at Monitor is nowhere different in most markets than working at A.T. Kearney or McKinsey. You're going to compete for the same projects, you're going to have very similar colleagues, working culture, and so on. And then again, I don't want to hate on Big Four, but just generalizing Big Four and saying Big Four is the same as MBB. No, there's huge differences. For one, there's all these different departments in Big Four, and just a few select positions or roles, like for example being a strategy consulting in Monitor Deloitte as part of the big Deloitte construct, will really be comparable with what you do at MBB Plus. Next up, you have the lower tier and the boutiques. These are generally companies like MBB Plus that are just a bit smaller, so they don't cover the whole globe geographically, or they don't cover all industries, so they might be limited to, let's say, the energy sector or to the public sector, advising governments and things like that. But they don't offer the whole spectrum of industries and functions that big MBB Plus giants do. The one thing you need to know here is there's also prestigious lower tier or boutique firms out there. They can be cool if you already know what industry or what function you are very interested in, but they can also be limiting because of that. If I start at MBB Plus at the beginning of my career, I have the whole spectrum open, I can jump into oil and gas, and in the next day I can do public sector on the next project, so that I can see a lot of different areas. For these boutiques, that's not possible. And next up, IT consulting. I mean, what the hell? Sometimes people seem to put IT consulting in the same bucket with MBB Plus, which is an absolute disaster. If you work for a company like Tata Consulting Services, or there's a lot of Indian firms actually that do pretty solid IT consulting, but hey, it's IT consulting, okay? It has nothing to do whatsoever with management consulting. The team sizes are different, the project duration is different. Most of the time these are heavy IT implementation projects. You are for 12-24 months at the client side, and trust me, you don't have any face time with any upper management, okay? So IT consulting is something you want to forget about pretty quickly, unless you are interested in IT, which is okay. Now here's the thing about these different categories that you need to take away with you. Let me tell you a quick story that I would actually tell younger Kevin, because it's probably something I might do differently if I would start out again 10 years ago, 11 years ago. A wrong decision to join the wrong firm can haunt you for literally years, okay? Now, let me explain. When I was recruiting, when I finished my bachelor's degree, I was like, hell no, you know, I'm not doing a master's degree now. I was always a very practical person, did a lot of nice internships at great firms around the globe, and I figured that's actually where I excel, you know? I want to do something practical. I don't want to study another 2 years for a worthless degree just to have it on my CV. And if I want that, I might do an MBA in the future at a nice prestigious HSW type of university, and that's it. So I said, okay, let me apply to consulting jobs because everybody's talking about consulting. I guess it's a solid start for a career. I did that. I was rather tactical about it, even though I didn't really have a clue looking back now. So I put the most important interviews as the last ones. As the last interviews, I had scheduled Roland Berger, and after that McKinsey. And I got a couple of, I applied to other firms, Monitor, Deloitte among them too, because we talked about it. And I got a couple of rejections, and I got accepted, got job offers from a couple of other firms, okay? And when it came to the last 2 interviews, or the last 2 processes, Roland Berger, after a long process, and I was the only guy with a bachelor's degree sitting there, okay? Where I came into this room, and it was like a group, kind of a group setting at first. I came into the room, there was 20 other people, more or less, and they all had master's degrees, and I was the only one with a bachelor's there. I said, okay, interesting. And in the end, out of these 20 people, 2 got offers. One of them was me. And I was very happy about that. It was one of the firms that I really liked. And so I accepted the offer. And I declined the interview at McKinsey, which was scheduled to be a couple of weeks later in Poland, in Warsaw, because I actually applied to the Polish office because I'm half Polish. So far, so good. What happened next is that I had a couple of, settings that made me think about this decision. So for example, I was sitting with a project team, a couple of simps, to be honest, okay? A couple of simps who were also from my firm. We were doing a project. So these were the kind of people who have insecurities, and it shows, okay? If you have insecurities, that's all right, but keep them to yourself or discuss them with a couple of loved ones and figure out a solution for them, but don't show them to the whole outside world. There's no point of doing so. And one thing one situation I remembered was we actually were advising the same client as McKinsey was. Okay, so there was a McKinsey project team and there was a Roland Berger project team, and one of the guys in my team said something like, "Oh, the McKinsey guys are coming." And he said it in a way that kind of transmitted that they rank higher in the pyramid of hierarchies, while also having this kind of self-pitying tone to it, And that was a moment when I was thinking, holy shit, what am I doing here? Why didn't I join these guys, the McKinsey guys? I'm sure they don't say shit like that. And that was just one example, but essentially what happened, that's why I'm saying my downfall, is I was thinking a lot about, hey, should I reapply? Should I end this job? And even after I quit consulting, after I went into venture capital and startup acceleration in China, I was thinking about, maybe I should, go back to consulting and try to get into McKinsey and kind of, give me this prestigious stamp. I think I need it. And that went on for a while, and I knew in my heart that it doesn't make any freaking sense, and that what I'm doing right now is going to be much more beneficial for my career. But I kind of had this subliminal urge, okay? And just like years later, today I don't have these feelings anymore, I'm on a completely different trajectory than I would be if I would have, rejoined another consulting firm or McKinsey after these years, and I'm doing better, so I'm on a better trajectory. But I hope this, very personal story kind of gives you an insight into the fact that there's these kind of decisions that can haunt you for a very long time. And so you want to make sure that you really understand the significance of these decisions. In general, if I can give you some stupid, straightforward advice, always go for the top, okay? So if you have sometimes I talk to girls and they're like, I have this possibility to join this super top tier law firm, or I could go for the smaller one because they have better work-life balance. Screw that, go for the top first, work your ass off for at least 1 year. What's so bad about it? Maybe you lose 1 year worth of life and fun. It's great. After that, you can still go down, you can still downgrade, and guess what? You're going to enter these lower tier firms with a much higher salary and much higher respect from all the other colleagues. So never go for the middle or for the bottom, always go for the top first, and then you can downgrade as you wish. Now, what do you do as a rookie? We all know these, advertisements by BCG, for example. They have some screwed up advertisements on Instagram lately, and we all know the case books and so on, where they talk about, hey, this is roughly what you do as a consultant. This is all bullshit, so I'm going to tell you what you really do. Okay, it's quite straightforward. First of all, you build PowerPoint slides. Okay, that's your daily bread. Consulting firms still the main product that they give out to their clients are PowerPoint slides, okay? And in these slides, you have a couple of pieces of advice. Some of them are valid, some of them might be bullshit. But in the end, you deliver a report, 200 slides. There you go. You give a presentation to the management, and everybody's happy. Now, most of these big firms, MBB Plus, they have graphics departments, so you don't need to, become a PowerPoint wizard and be able to draw super sexy PowerPoint slides. Most of the times you can sketch them out, or you can just write the rough outline of it, and then a graphics department is going to take care of it. But I remember a lot of situations where we had a steering committee, so that's like, one of these big presentations where you show these are the preliminary or final results that we found, and you show this to the management of the company that you're advising. And I remember situations where we were sitting there 11 p.m. in the night, next morning 8 a.m. there's this freaking steering committee, and we knew if we sent this, we had a couple of things that we needed to correct in these slides, or we had totally new outcomes, coming from the Excel model, because one of our, the guy, not gonna mention his name, a very dear friend of mine, he was building the Excel model and he completely screwed up. And in the last minute, it was like, oh, holy shit, guys, there's actually all the numbers need to be changed. Okay, so we go ahead and we know it. We can't, let the graphics department do this kind of job. If we do it, they might be too late. They might not be able to take the job in time because they're also always busy, right, doing some kind of slides. And so what we were doing was we were mindlessly changing numbers on slides for hours and hours. And then you have formatting problems. You might have built some nice graphics and graphs, diagrams on your slides, and you need to change up the numbers. So these are kind of things you do. I think we finished at 4 a.m. in the night. I remember I went to the hotel. It was quite far. There was a project in Stockholm, in Sweden. I went to the hotel and I looked at the clock. I sent a picture to my then girlfriend. Told her, okay, 1 hour left till breakfast, and went to sleep. Then, slept awfully bad, obviously. Woke up an hour later, or 1.5 hours later, had breakfast, and went to this freaking steering committee. So that's what happens. Next up, Excel modeling. I built a couple of Excel models over my career, and it's always a bit scary when you get started, but it's, for me personally, it was one of the most meditative tasks that you could have, and it's extremely gratifying. Okay, so if you start building these models, what you usually would do is you sit down and you think about it very deeply before you open any tabs or you write any kind of formula. You think about it very deeply. Maybe take a piece of paper and a pen, and you write down the rough structure of it. That's like 50% of the war, of the battle won. Because if you structure the model incorrectly, or if you just, start typing some formulas and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna wing it somehow, that ends up being a not so impressive model. So always start by thinking about the structure first. And this, for me, was always a very dreadful task, because if I screw up the structure, it's going to be a pain in the ass to build this model. And then obviously you always run into problems, you have some reference errors or whatever, but usually you're able to fix those pretty quickly. So we were building models like, for example, to give you an idea, we were doing a project where we advised a very, very large sugar producer, and that there was a couple of changes in the industry that basically affected the whole sugar industry, and these guys had serious trouble because the price for sugar was going down, and they were losing money. And so we built a model that was going to predict what how the worldwide sugar supply and price was going to change in the coming months and years. Obviously that's difficult to predict, but we gave our best. Next one that I built, totally different, but for example for a big logistics provider that had pallets, this stuff where you put stuff on. They had these pallets, and I was modeling how they had a couple of interesting ideas actually to put sensors on these pallets so that you can track them along the supply chain. And different types of sensors, some that only had GPS, some that actually measured the weight of stuff, of goods that are on this pallet. So you could always know, is this pallet empty or is something on it along the supply chain. And for example, I was modeling the revenues, the potential revenues and the business model for this kind of stuff. So is this something you guys should, what's the invest? Should you implement something like this? Are you going to be able to make money with it or not? Okay, so that's that. You assemble data from various databases. You're not always going to start out as an analyst and build a massive worldwide sugar prediction model. Most of the times what you're going to do is you're going to be told, hey, can you download from database XYZ, can you download the prices for the past 20 years of grain? Okay, and then you go into your database, which you have access to through the consulting firm, and you download that stuff. Typically, and that's also something you're not going to read on any career websites, but I know a lot of consultants and junior consultants who, when doing this kind of stuff, they listen to something, they might be listening to music or to podcasts, because this stuff these are very easy tasks, you download these spreadsheets. Sometimes it's a lot of data that you need to download, so it takes some time, and then you kind of copy paste it into some kind of model or some kind of template that the senior consultant gave to you. So you can easily listen to some Joe Rogan podcasts or stream some Kevin John videos on the side. What you also do, and this was something that impressed me the most when I was very young and staffed on these consulting projects, is you start thinking about a new topic or industry very intensively. So you need to imagine, if you're in one of these MBB plus firms that really cover all the industries and all the functions, you're going to have a lot of projects where it's your first time thinking about this industry. I mean, when I was thrown on this sugar industry project, do you think I ever gave a freaking F about the sugar industry? No. So, what you do is you read a lot of Wikipedia articles, you read about You know, you sometimes read like small guides and books. You try to find out who are the thought leaders in this field, who are the most important players, what are their market shares, and so on. And you do all of that pretty quickly because you don't want the client to realize this guy knows nothing about this industry, right? So once you talk the next time to the senior management or to the project leader on the client side, you don't want them to know that, you know, you have never heard about this freaking sugar industry and never cared. You want them to think that you're an expert. By the way, that's most of the times also what you're sold as, you know. So when consulting firms propose a team to a client, they are never going to say, you know, this analyst, Kevin, he has no freaking clue about the sugar industry, but they're always going to say, yeah, he's, you know, I mean, he had a couple of these kind of projects, or he has some prior experience in related industries, which most of the times is bullshit. So you need to get up to speed pretty quickly, in other words. And I always thought this was extremely impressive, especially project managers, so people who have worked in the industry for, let's say, 5-6 years. You see how quickly they get up to speed and running, and that's nice to see. And I remember that, for example, on this sugar project, but also on another one that was even I mean, that was even freakier. That was about, I mean, that was a project where we were optimizing a pig slaughtering facility. Okay, think about that, a pig slaughtering facility. We were optimizing that, and one of the KPIs, I kid you not, is kills per minute. How many of these pigs are being killed per minute? Okay, and obviously none of us had ever thought about this industry or this kind of business model before. I mean, what the hell, right? And one of these project managers that was also thrown on this project, I just worked on this for a very, very short time, a couple of weeks. He was thrown on this project. For day one, he knows nothing about the industry. And he was talking to the project leader on the client side. And I was like, man, he's really winging it, you know? I mean, it sounds like he knows exactly what he's talking about. But he didn't. I mean, he told me he had no clue about it. And then, more impressively even, after I think it was 1 week, 2 weeks, he knew everything. I mean, he was so deep into it that I was impressed. I was not able to talk with him about it. I needed to look up things. And it was really feeling like within 2 weeks, he got up to the same level as someone within the industry who had been working in this industry for, 10 years probably. So quite impressive. What else do? You take notes during meetings. You do interviews with experts. You know, when you need some type of data that's not available from some kind of website or database, and what you typically do is you call up some experts. You ask them a couple of intelligent questions. I remember that taking these notes during meetings was always kind of a boring thing to do, but sometimes you had situations where this got you into very nice surroundings. So I was supposed to take notes on a project where we were optimizing we were basically creating a big ass strategy for multiple years for a very well-known coffee company, and I'm sure you know it. Obviously I can't tell the name. I was sitting in Italy, and I was supposed to take notes during a meeting between our partner, senior partner, and the CEO of this company, so top management. And how old was I? I don't know, 20? I mean, I was a rookie, okay, complete rookie, and it was extremely impressive, That's when you learn the most. Like, that's when you see the power dynamics between this CEO and our senior partner. That's when you notice how they talk, how they look, what they do with their hands, how they dodge certain questions, and that was always extremely impressive. So taking notes sometimes is exciting, sometimes it's not. And then lastly, you also have a lot of admin, like, you know, if you're a junior colleague, for sure you're going to be the one that's scheduling the meetings, coordinating some kind of emails and answering them. There's always shared folders in consulting companies. So, you know, you have like a project folder where you put all the research, all the models, all the PowerPoint presentations, and it's always nicely structured, so you don't just dump it on your folder as you might do on your personal laptop, but you structure it nicely. And as a junior colleague, it's your job to make sure that, you know, the structure remains and it's always cleaned up and looks nicely, and everyone is able to find all the data as quickly as possible. And then you have a couple of dull tasks. You might even go to, you know, get your colleagues some lunch or whatever if they don't have time to do so, and, you know, other kind of dull tasks that you have in every job, to be honest, if you're a junior person. Now, next up, what do you learn and how do you make the most out of your consulting experience? I also have a very funny story there. Let me first start with the first couple of points. Okay, so you learn structure, MISI, diligence, strategic business concepts, proper communication. So MISI, I mean, most of you that have heard about consulting have also heard about MISI. MISI, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, is a concept that you use extremely often in consulting. It's something that you just, I mean, I have friends who worked in consulting for many years, and now, for example, they work in private equity or they work in the industry. And when we are together, I just came back from a trip in Iceland, and we had a couple of lists, I think, in advertisements that were not MISI, you know, where you had bullet points and they were obviously not MISI. And that's the kind of things that just, I mean, we laughed about it. We were like, hey man, this is not MISI. Do you think they know? And we're like, that's, you know, such a funny insider joke when you're an ex-consultant, aka absolute nerd when it comes to these kind of things. But no one in the population gives a crap about MISI, you know. It's a nice concept to think about more often. So I encourage you to read about it. Next up, diligence. There's this thing called zero defect in management consulting. I've talked about it a lot. Also with the teams that I work with on my personal ventures and my assistants and so on, I always tell them zero defect is what we're aiming for. And that just means that before you send out a presentation or an email, just read through it one more time, make sure there's no mistakes. If you do an Excel calculation, also, you know, once you finish it, just look at it again, make sure there's no mistakes. Whatever is being sent to me as your supervisor is supposed to have zero defects. Strategic and business concepts. Obviously, that's also something you will learn and you will think about a lot. And lastly, proper communication with executives and how to navigate hierarchical environments. As a junior person in a hierarchical environment as consulting, because consulting is extremely hierarchical. Many firms, you know, advertise it as being non-hierarchical, and, you know, we have these flat hierarchies. That's bullshit. Consulting still is and will be for the foreseeable future an extremely hierarchical environment, because you work with firms that have been hierarchical for the past couple of decades and you consult them, so you need to somehow play on the same level as they do. You can't play a different game suddenly. So you learn very well how to navigate these environments, how to talk to someone that is, you know, multiple hierarchies above you or below you, and how to really make the best out of these situations. Now, before we talk about networking, let me tell this short story about the 3 stakes. That is also something. So we were having a project completion dinner. Usually when you finish a project, you will always do something fun, you know, so the minimum is to have a nice dinner with the project team, sometimes including the clients, sometimes without the clients, just, you know, your project team. And sometimes you even do fancier stuff, you go bowling or paintballing or whatever, you know. And we were having this dinner at a steak restaurant. Side note, you will eat a lot of steak if you go into consulting. At least from my personal experience and the people that I know, steak is usually like the #1 choice when it comes to picking a dinner. And that was also the case for us. So we were having steak. I was sitting next to this partner that was the head of the project, and there was a couple of other people around. And this partner, he really liked me for some reason, and he was also a big fan of food. When the waitress came, he asked, okay, so how many grams is this steak, because I'm quite hungry. And she said something like it's 200 grams or whatever. And he's like, he was super straightforward. He's like, 200 grams only? Like, you know, who's that going to feed? An ant? And then the waitress, obviously, because I mean, these guys are going to spend hundreds of euros, so they are important customers for you. For her, that's a very embarrassing situation. What is she supposed to say, right? She can't just magically change the size of the steaks. So she's like, okay, yeah, sir, sorry, that's like our standard size. What you might do is you might order 2. And he's like, are you kidding me? I'm not going to be able to eat 2 steaks. And and I'm like watching this situation, kind of low-key embarrassed. And then what I said is, man, I mean, I didn't say man. I said his name. Let's call him Peter for now. Peter, what if we order 3 steaks? 1 for you, 1 for me, and the third one we share. Isn't that a good compromise? And in that moment, you know, this partner's eyes lit up. He had like the nicest smile on his face, and he's like, Kevin, that's why I like you. That's real out of the box thinking. Let's go. That's what we're going to do. 3 steaks, please, for us. And I mean, he went on. He went on to talk about this story for years after that. You know, we had a different project together after that for a couple of months later, and he told the project leader on the client side about this story. Oh, and I have Kevin with me. You know what happened when we went to this steak restaurant? This guy is a real out of the box thinker. So that's what happens. What do I want to say here? It's kind of a continuation of this networking point. You need to take the network with you. And the way you do that is by just being yourself and also being funny. You know, if you are one of these hardos that only try to please the partner, always try to be, you know, politically correct, never say anything wrong, chances are nobody will remember you, and you will not build real relationships. But guess what? This guy, we have a very good relationship today, simply because I was so real, raw, and unfiltered, and he was too. So it was a great match. Last point to this networking point is, when you start consulting as a rookie, probably you're going to be like 20 plus something. You are extremely young. Okay, these big boys you're talking to, these consulting partners, they are 40 plus at least, and some of the senior partners are much older. So the good thing is you're not perceived as competition, you know. Whereas if you try to network with the senior consultant who's 29, then, you know, he might have some thoughts. Oh, should I really help him? Basically, you know, he's catching up to me, and these kind of weird bullshit thoughts, but people do have them. So always make sure, it's kind of the same point that we made about always go for the top in your career. You can also apply that to people. Always try to network with the most senior ones, because paradoxically these are the ones who are open to helping you the most, because subliminally they don't see you as a competition. What they see you as is more as a mentee, you know, someone who's so young, so cute, and so naive that it's worth helping them. And these were the best mentor-mentee relationships that I have developed with people who are literally 30 years, 40 years older than I am. Last point, what you will learn on this slide is you will not learn how to start a company. Many people have this illusion that, oh, you know, I mean, I get so many messages on Instagram. Kevin, I want to start a company, but first I figured out I'll go to consulting for 2 years. What that shows to me is this person doesn't really want to start a company, or they are completely confused about the world. If you want to start a company, if you have this strong urge, if you maybe already have a couple of ideas or directions that you would start a company in, then do that and don't go into consulting. There's no point doing so. You are not going to learn how to start a company in consulting. It might make sense if you say at some point maybe I want to start a company. Then it's a totally different game, you know. I see, okay, you haven't decided yet. You don't know where your life's going to take you in the next 5 to 10 years, so it's completely fine to go into consulting first and figure it out. But if you say, I want to be a founder, that is my dream, and that's what I'm going to do, there's no point going into consulting. Now, for all of these points, if you have questions, just put them in the comments below, and I will try to answer them. Because I'm sure there's some aspects of this that are confusing or that you might want to have some more information on. Happy to provide it. Lastly, what you're going to learn, how to make the most of your consulting experience. So you're going to have obviously industry and project specific learning. So if you work on a project in the sugar industry, you're going to have different learnings than if you work in the digitization function, or if you work on an M&A project that I did, for example, for a motorcycle company. Extremely cool project. Learned so much about this motorcycle industry that made me, want to ride a motorcycle myself, which I finally got this motorcycle license in a 1-week intensive course. Long story short, these are specific learnings you're going to take with you. And last point, little bit of an illegal tip for you. Obviously I never did that, right? But there's a lot of templates flying around at these consulting firms for nice Excel calculations, for sexy PowerPoint templates and slides. I heard that there's some people who copy them on an USB drive and kind of modify them and use them for their own purposes in the future. Okay, don't advise you to do that, but there's people who do that. And it's obviously, it's illegal. I don't think that I haven't encountered any instances where someone who left the firm was caught doing that, because it's not being tracked as far as I know. I don't know because I've never done that, but that is something some people do, So what lifestyle do you live? Let me give you the unfiltered truth. In the past, the way it was very high travel. So from Monday to Thursday at least you were at the client side, you were advising these people, meeting with them. For me, I was Italy, France, Sweden, Poland, Thailand, Egypt. Now Egypt, for example, what also does happen a lot is you get promises. Oh, we're starting. This was, for example, Egypt. This was supposed to be a very cool project in the middle of nowhere in Egypt, where a company that had nothing to do with it, was doing something totally different, wanted to start a big field full of flowers and grow flowers and sell them across the world. I don't know why they wanted to do this in Egypt. And they want to, first question that comes to mind is, how the hell do you water all these flowers in a desert like Egypt? And they wanted us to figure that out. I was really looking forward to this project because it's a new culture, it's a completely different way of doing business. It's also cool to be able to explore Egypt a bit on the weekends. In the end, the project didn't come through. Okay, so there's often situations like that in consulting where you have a lot of hopes. Oh, there's going to be a nice project in Dubai or whatever. Then in the end, it doesn't come through. But looking back, I went to a lot of nice countries, saw a lot of great offices, And I'm grateful for that experience, and I'm pitying the people who are starting in consulting now, because even though you still have travel, what I hear from the people that are going into consulting now, it's different. You know, it's less travel, it's more Zoom calls, it's more working from home or your home office. And to be honest, for me, that was at least 30% of the value of a consulting career. To have this travel experience and meet the people in person, see the power dynamics. I mean, I told you about this situation where I was sitting with the CEO and the partner. I would have learned 10%. I would have, you know, just learned 10% of what I learned in this real life setting if this thing would have taken place in a Zoom call. Okay, so that's a big minus, and that is something you need to incorporate in your thinking process, whether or not you want to go into consulting or not. Working hours are high, so working 70 hours is not uncommon. We talked about these steering committees. In front of them, you often work longer hours. So, for example, this freaking project in Stockholm that really drove me crazy. I remember the last 3 weeks or so before the steering committee, we were always working till 2 or 3 in the night. And then we started, I think, at 9 or 8:30 in the morning. So there was not a lot of sleep. And I'll be honest with you, I was a crazy muff. Okay, I was a crazy MF. What I did, because I was so focused on keeping my structure, on keeping my physical health as a framework for my, let's say, my ambitions, that I went to the gym after that. So it was 2 a.m. in the night, and then I was going to the hotel gym, working out for, let's say, 45 minutes, then downing a protein shake, and then I was going to sleep. Today I wouldn't do that anymore, because I recognize that sleep is kind of also part of the equation if you want to build muscle. And once I started sleeping more, actually the past 2 or 3 years, or sleeping enough, I also saw that my body changed a lot, and I gained much more muscle than I did before. But back then, that's what I was doing. You know, I was working till 2 or 3, then going to the gym, and then getting up again at 7:30 to have breakfast, and then quickly go to the client site. And last thing, you get used to very luxurious traveling. So, for example, at Rowan Berger, if you can be a junior consultant, you have the right to lease a Porsche as a company car. I had a couple of colleagues who did that, you know. So then you're like 20, 22 or whatever, and you drive around a nice 911 as a company car. I didn't do that. I leased a BMW M240, so I know that's also a quite sporty car. But I just did it, I think, in the last half year or so, when I already knew I was going to quit, and I was like, I just, you know, I don't really need a car, but I'm just going to take this one to have a bit of fun the last couple of months. So you get used to that, right? Like, I mean, once you ride around a Porsche or take your Porsche to work every single day, it gets kind of tough to say, wait a minute, I quit. You know, I'm going to start this startup. I'm going to start with 0 salary, and maybe in 1 year I'm going to have a valuation of 10 million, or maybe not. You know, maybe it's going to be 0 still, and then, you know, I didn't drive around my nice Porsche for 1 year. You know, first class tickets, whatever, all these things, you get used to it. And that is one of the dangers that we're going to talk about later in consulting, is that you get used to these things and it's difficult to get off. It's like a drug, you know. You are being put on this heroin, this luxurious heroin, heroin, no idea. Never took it, and then it's difficult to get off. Now, what is the pay compared to other professions discussed? And will it make you a freaking GOAT, aka a billionaire? Let's keep this one short because I can't tell any personal war stories concerning pay, obviously, right? So the medium is around 120k plus US dollar in the US. In the EU or in Europe, it's going to be lower. In terms of euro, so there we're talking about what, I mean, 70, 80, 90k, depending on whether you have a bachelor's or a master's degree. And we're talking about MBB plus here, right? I mean, I already mentioned, if you are interested in Big Four, nice for you, but that's like, just take these numbers and, you know, halve them for most of the roles in Big Four companies. That being said, this is like a medium starting level. I know it's already high if you compare it to the rest 90% of the population. But that's not who we are. That's not our ambition level, right? If you're watching this video, chances are your ambition level is top 0.01%, and you want to have a, you know, ultra high net worth at some point. So there's no point comparing ourselves to someone who, you know, who's average. But when we compare ourselves within these high performance brackets, then this is kind of medium pay. What would be higher? For example, if you start in investment banking, your salary is going to be higher. Also, if you manage to get into a hedge fund, there's a couple of very prestigious analyst positions in these hedge funds. That's going to be higher. What's going to be lower, for example, VC, most probably you're going to be earning less in a startup, obviously, even though it can be a great way to get hyper rich, joining a nice startup that is well funded. And we can talk about that in the future, because there's a couple of tricks how to find out which startup to join and which one has the highest probability to become a unicorn at some point, so that you become a, you know, multi-millionaire overnight. Yeah, but the salary is going to be lower. Now, will this make you a multi-millionaire, a billionaire at some point? Billionaire for sure not. Okay, so even if you're the most senior silverback Bateman partner at any given MBB plus firm, you're never going to get that rich. The reason is you start participating very late in this career. Okay, so only as a partner you really start participating in the deal volume that you bring into the firm, and you have actual shares in the firm. Before that, there's nothing like that. Yeah, there's a bonus, but, you know, screw the bonus. It's not going to make you rich anytime soon. You might, you know, afford a nice Rolex from it or whatever, or at some point a nice car, but that's not what we're aiming for, right? What we want is a share in the revenue stream or the value, that the equity value that we're creating. So for example, participating career would be, if you are working at a startup, you get some kind of share in the employee stock option pool, ESOP. Okay, if you have that, you are working your ass off. You're making sure that this startup gets funded well and at some point is being bought. Once it's being bought, you know, part of this pie is yours, and that's exactly what you want. Another example of a participating career would be sales. As, you know, plain as it sounds, but sales is a great way to get rich if you're actually good. If you do B2B sales and you're one of the best sales guys at the company that you're doing these sales for, yeah, like every time you sell this product, which sometimes costs hundreds of thousands, if you sell it to enterprise customers, you are getting a cut from that. And if you're in the top 5% of sales guys, I promise you, you are going to make a hell lot of money. And other companies are going to start taking notice. They'll be like, hey, this Kevin guy, he's, you know, best sales guy we have in the industry. I want to have him. Give him as much as he wants. Okay, that's a participating career. That's something you don't have in consulting unless you're a partner. So there's better ways to get rich, is basically what I'm trying to say. So here we have a bit of the overview of what I think is, you know, the primary pillars of building wealth And obviously, I mean, everybody knows I'm not a freaking billionaire. I'm also not a ultra high net worth individual, but I've done well and I'm going to do much better in the future. So I think I can just tell you about these principles and you can try to apply them or you don't. The bottom line is it's not easy, you know. There's not like all these freaking YouTubers who are getting on my nerves, who are telling you, oh, you know, you just need to buy Bitcoin at the right point, or you need to follow this simple trading strategy or some other bullshit like that. You either have that, you know, so people promising you richness overnight, or you have some freaking average people who are telling you, yeah, you can do this nice career at a big 4 company, and they're all nice, well-intended people, but they are not for us. They are not for us who are striving to become great, who are striving to break out from this mass of average people and quite simply trying to build a freaking legacy on this planet. Okay, so long story short, here are the pillars that I think are important. You need a participating career. Again, participating career means that you participate in the revenues or the equity that you're creating for the business you're working for. That is different from a career, which is, for example, consulting in the first couple of years, where you just, you know, you have your career, you have your little bonus, and you're a happy little minion in this big system, versus a business. If you build your own business, obviously you are taking all the shots and you are owning all the equity, or a majority or a part of the equity, depending on how you are funded. What are nice careers that I think have good potential? Finance, so hedge funds, PE, investment banking, equity research, asset management, and so on, are all careers. Some of them have participating components a bit earlier in the process, some a bit later. Sales, already talked about that. B2B sales, preferably, very high commissions. Tech startups, because either you have equity or you have so-called RSUs, stock options that you can redeem after a certain point. For example, if you entered Google as a developer at the right point in time, you made a lot of money through these RSUs, for example. And there's other upcoming future tech giants that you could join now, get some nice RSUs for yourself, which right now in the recession are also nicely priced, and make a lot of money with that, or revenue shares. Okay, last one, consulting. Also nice. At some point, you know, you have a participating component, which is when you're a partner. And it is true, if you're trying to become, for example, if your dream is to become a Fortune 500 CEO, for example, consulting might be one of the straightest paths to get there, you know? Because if you start your own company, that's like pretty far-fetched. That's not going to teach you all this politics, you know, all this hierarchy game within these structures that are decades old. These are things that you're going to learn if you work in consulting or investment banking. So if you're aiming for that, consulting might be one of the best choices for you, actually. But I know that many of you are not aiming for that. Even more so as it's a very uncertain path, right? You don't become CEO overnight, but you put in the work. You become partner at the consulting firm. It's like a 20-year path, 20+ year path with an extremely uncertain outcome that is also dependent on a lot of politics. Next pillar is a side business. If you go to flippa.com, it's a website where I also sold one of my side businesses some time ago. You can actually get some very nice inspiration, okay? So Flippa is not where you sell your multi-million-dollar business, or even, you know, your startup that is funded and valued in the hundreds of millions. Flippa is where you sell literally your side business, you know, like you have a blog, you have a micro SaaS company, you have something along those lines that is creating, let's say, 10,000, 50,000, or even 100,000 annual recurring revenue. Then Flippa is the point for you to go. That's where I also sold the business. And that's where you can get a lot of nice inspiration for businesses that you could start. The nice thing about these side businesses is you can build them on the side, Even if you work 70 plus hours, you still have time on the weekends. You can build them on the side. You can build up this revenue stream. At the beginning, it's like, what, $500 per month? Not very spectacular. But at some point, it's going to be 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. And then it's suddenly starts to get interesting, and you get to the point where this earns you more than your main job. And then the nice thing you have about these side businesses is you have it's basically like having an option, you know. It's like having an option that you can sell, because at some point you might say, you know, I'm not that passionate about this side business anymore. Now what you can do is you can list it on flippa.com, and if this thing generates 5,000, let's say, you know, let's pick like a low number, it generates 5,000 per month. Then, you know, you could sell this at a 10x, 12x price. So 12x, like 60,000 that you could pocket. So in addition to the 5K that you earned every month, now you have this nice exit. You get rid of the thing. You don't need to worry about it anymore. You have 60K in the bag and can do with it whatever you want. Now we picked very low numbers, but you could think about higher numbers. This thing generates 20K per month, for example. You have very nice exit optionalities depending on the multiple. Multiple can be 10x, but can also be higher. And last pillar, you need to do something with this money. So the best thing you can do is to have a very high savings rate. I'm no fan of these, you know, things like the FIRE movement where you think about every single penny. No, sometimes you also just need to live, and you need to enjoy some of the money that you have. You need to invest it into yourself, buy courses, buy books, and so on. But you want to make sure that you have a reasonably high savings rate, you know. So ideally you can live in a comfortable apartment, but not a huge apartment. I would not buy fancy cars or motorcycles or whatever, but live below your means, save most of that, and investing is like a whole other topic that I also discussed in a couple of videos that you can search up on my channel. You know, where I talk about what would be my investment split. Me as someone who's obviously also investing in startups, that looks a little bit different, even though I think for many people it would be a good thing to be able to invest in startups as part of a portfolio allocation strategy that makes sense. Which is also why I think, why I told you, one of the secret goals that I have with this community that we're building, to build some kind of syndicate or maybe even democratized VC fund at some point. And here we have the secondary pillars, just very quickly, but what I do think, and I think this kind of differentiates me a little bit from other. And here we have the secondary pillars, and this differentiates me a little bit from other people that are only thinking about business and only talking about that. But I think what's also important is your fitness. You know, if you know me, if you follow me around on Instagram, you know that fitness is a big part of my life. That's not just going to the gym. For me, that's actually a lot of martial arts, which also teaches you a lot of thinking processes, a lot of mental lessons. So fitness being a sick cunt, you could say. Specialization, so you want to be a polymath versus being a generalist, or just being a specialist focused on one tiny little thing that also doesn't have as much value as being a polymath. Geo-diversification, I mean, you saw my move. You probably have followed me around for the past couple of years to China. This was one of the moves where I learned the most and I earned the most, okay? So this was no joke. This was, for me, a life-changing thing. Just going to China for like 3.5 years. I was quite lucky how things went. But I was also bold that I took this step, coming from a very, very stable career trajectory. I had offers at VC funds that wanted me to become their investment manager in Berlin. I know exactly the moment when I picked up the phone I had the offer, I declined the offer, and I knew now there's no way back, you know, because this was one of my potential dream jobs, you know, to do this, become an investment manager at this fund, big ass fund in Berlin. I said nope, sorry friend. And he asked, okay, so yeah, what's the counter offer, or what are you going to do now? And I told him, I'm going to China, man. I'm starting my own business. And that's kind of what happened, more or less. I mean, I was building a division in a Chinese company, so technically didn't start my own business, even though I started businesses on the side. And it all went pretty well. And the last point is networking. Already discussed that. It's very important. Exit opportunities in consulting. So zooming back in to the consulting discussion, where can you exit to? Other consulting firms. I've seen friends go from Roland Berger to BCG, for example, a couple of my friends. I saw a couple of partners going from our firm to Big Four, because Big Four pays a hell lot of a salary. I told you already that they have a lot of money. So if you're a senior partner and Big Four knows that you have great clients that you are going to bring with you, if they manage to poach you, they are ready to pay you a couple of millions. No worry about that. Private equity, it's like a classic, you know. There's a high overlap with what you do in consulting, with what you do in private equity. Also depending a little bit on what you did in consulting, right? You can certainly do a lot of that. If you're a consultant that only has done digital projects, then yeah, probably there's not much overlap, and you just drew a lot of clouds and bubbles and nice pictures. That's not going to be very useful. But if you're like me, you worked on a couple of M&A projects during your time in consulting, yeah, there's high overlap. You join clients. I had multiple offers from clients throughout the 3 years that I worked in consulting. I think I worked on 11 projects, and a couple of those actually offered me a job. Obviously, it's not super obvious, you know. They come to your door, to your project room, in front of all your colleagues, and they tell you, "Hey, Mr. Werner, would you like to join us and accept this offer?" No, but it's, you know, during one-on-one talks, for example, that they ask you. And I had one situation where this guy that I was working a lot, like the client, and he was my interface, and he asked me, "What's your next step?" So I told him, you know, I mean, you always keep your answers vague in these kind of situations, right? So you said, you know, I'm considering multiple options. For now, I'm very happy with the job, blah blah blah. And he asked, have you ever considered joining our industry? And then when I said, yeah, you know, maybe it's a very fascinating industry, nice industry dynamics, whatever the hell, he said that they have a couple of, you know, openings and are looking for great candidates. And that's obviously when, you know, okay, I mean, he wants to tell you that he would like to have you. And I had multiple situations like that. Startup is also becoming more and more fancy, right? So many of these consultants, they see, hey, you know, these startups actually, that's a good way to get rich. And so you see a lot of consultants starting startups, some of them very successfully, a lot of them not successfully, but that is certainly also an exit option. Alright, so now we talked about all these things about consulting, what the work content is, what the pay is, what were some of the funny war stories that I lived through in my consulting days. Some of them might have been interesting to you. And now I'm pretty sure you now have a much better, much more authentic picture than you had before, okay? And feel free to rewatch some of these scenes, feel free to take some notes. But now, based on all of that, what is the danger and what is the criticism of management consulting? And what are also some of the considerations for you thinking about whether or not to enter this industry? First of all, big criticism, it doesn't create value for society. And what the critics say is basically this is a service industry, okay? So we have massive amounts of people who are, instead of creating a new product, creating a new service, a new company, what they do is they join a consulting firm and they just service existing companies. So instead of going from 0 to 1, as Peter Thiel would say, they are creating something completely new. They are just going, they are helping companies go from 1 to 1.1, or from 5 to 5.1. So marginal improvement, sometimes not even that, because we know that there is projects, and that's another criticism, that don't lead anywhere. You literally create a PowerPoint presentation of 300 slides, and what happens is this thing is being put into the shelf, in the CEO's office, and is never going to looked at again, let alone being implemented. So that does happen. I addressed this point at length in my prestige trap video. So just check this one out. It basically, explains this whole point in length and gives you a little bit of a conclusion of what you should do with it. Next one, the sense of purpose. I'll be extremely honest with you, okay? 99% of the people that I talk to in my consulting days, and also today, from various firms, I'm not just talking about Roland Berger, I'm talking about all the big firms that you have out there. And I know so many people at all of these firms, through either because I coached them to get into these firms, or because they studied with me and then they went on to work at these firms, and so on. So trust me, I have enough people that I was talking to. Not like 99% of them don't have any sense of purpose in their work. So if you ask them why are you doing this job, they will not tell you, because I'm helping these Fortune 500 or these DAX companies to get better, and I'm so passionate about it. I love working with these people and on these intricate problems. They will tell you they do it because of the money, or because it's gotten so comfortable, or because they still don't know what to do next, what industry to double down on. It's simply a fact that most of these people working in consulting don't have this deep sense of purpose. And maybe you don't need that, maybe it's just about what you learn. I like all the things that we discussed in the past hour or so. Maybe it's just about these things that you learn and that you take from this experience. But if you are a person that is looking for a deep sense of purpose in their work, I'm not sure consulting is the right thing for you. I know one person. We have this trip with our university friends. So we're like 10, 11, 12 friends. I mean, close circle of friends from the University of Mannheim that I studied at. We all studied together. We all went on to work at like these super typical jobs. Investment banking, consulting, private equity. That's it. And we do a trip once a year. And it's always nice trips, always to very nice locations, and we reconnect, we drink a lot, we have fun. And we obviously exchange, information about our careers and what we did and what's our next plan, and we help each other. That's, by the way, something you should do too, have at least some of your boys, get them together. If nobody organizes it, be the person that organizes it. I promise you this will be extremely helpful for your career, because all of these people that you get to know during your studies, think about them in 10, 20 years, they will, if they're not stupid as hell, they are going to be quite influential in their domain. And even though you might think today, being a very ambitious person, maybe being a little bit of a megalomaniac, that you're going to be the most successful from all of them, yeah, that's true, but you can always use support from good friends. So make sure to keep these friendships. Long story short, there's one guy, he's working at BCG, and he's the only one who told us, I actually enjoy this work. It's so fun, I'm so happy about it. And it gives me a sense of purpose to talk to these senior management and help them with their strategies. And I'm like, what the hell, man? I haven't heard that in years from a single consultant. And I mean, it makes you happy to hear these kind of things, because obviously then it's the right thing for him to do, you know? For God's sake, then this is the right career for you. Go on, become partner, senior partner, and make a great career out of it. But unfortunately, that's not the truth for most consultants, okay? Mindless work. You do have a bit of mindless work, and we talked about that also, so I don't need to repeat that. You can rewatch the scenes from within the first half an hour or so. You also have that in other jobs, but for example, I would say in a startup, if you start working in a startup, then you have less of these kind of things, you know, because there's no structures that you need to navigate around and sometimes do mindless work, but it's all, you know, getting to the goal as efficiently, as sturdy and quickly as possible. And so that kind of takes care of 90% of the mindless work that you need to do in jobs such as consulting or investment banking. And then there's this prestige trap. I mean, I told this very personal story at the beginning about myself, Roland Berger versus McKinsey, and then these doubts, you know, and these kind of unpleasant feelings that I had that have gotten so much better now. But that's a danger, you know, because you immerse yourself in an industry that, I mean, if you work in this industry for 1 or 2 years, you are going to be thinking about these kind of things, you know. Oh, is his job more prestigious than mine? I promise you that you are going to fall into this prestige trap. And that's okay, as long as you manage to get out of it again. Okay? So the time you work in this industry, also if you work in investment banking, you know, and you work at Morgan Stanley, you're going to be thinking, hey, you know, this guy's working at Goldman Sachs and he's working at a team that's a bit more prestigious than mine. So what am I supposed to do with that, you know? So you're gonna have these kind of moments if you enter this industry. The most important thing though is to get out of it again. So if you exit the industry, just forget about it, you know? Nobody gives a flying F about MBB plus outside of consulting, you know? Not even investment bankers do. They are like, you know, you guys are a freaking joke to us. Rightfully so or not, you know. So outside of this bubble that we're discussing, you know, people are impressed by doctors or maybe lawyers or whatever, you know, CEOs, yeah. But they, trust me, they don't give a, I mean, they don't give a flying F about is it BCG better or Bain or Oliver Wyman. Nah, nobody cares. Now, let's say I have convinced you that consulting is a great career path, okay? Which I was trying very hard for the past hour. What are the required internship and career paths to get there? And let's keep this short because I already discussed it in my master planning video to some degree. But this slide is new actually. So mid-sized consulting firm to MBB plus. You can, like an ideal career, an ideal internship path for you would be to go to a mid-sized consulting firm first, maybe in your second or third, in your second year at university. And then after that do an internship at MBB plus, and then either you get an offer to join or you apply with your internships to get an offer. As a full-time position. What you can also do is work at a bulge bracket, a big four, a hedge fund, or a VC. So if you manage to slide in one of these internships, they will be beneficial in any way for your consulting career. So any consulting recruiter, they will be impressed if they see a bulge bracket bank on your CV and you did some kind of investment banking stuff there, because they will know, okay, this person knows how to build an Excel model. They know the basics of hierarchies of communication. Same for big four, hedge funds, and VC. What about the MBA? I know not all of you are 18-year-olds, right? Some of you are older, 25, 30, 35, further in their career, but there are sometimes situations where you consider, should I go into consulting? Now, one of the ways you can do so is by doing an MBA. The problem with an MBA, it's quite expensive. Okay, so you shouldn't do some kind of bullshit MBA. There's no point doing some kind of bullshit MBA. If you do an MBA, do a proper one. Okay, so go to Wharton, Harvard, INSEAD in Europe, maybe something like the London LSE, but don't do some kind of MBA where you maybe you pay a little bit less, but nobody knows the school. There's no point. So that's the problem. It costs money. So there's a couple of questions you need to ask yourself. Did you study something business related or not? If you didn't study anything business related, an MBA is a great refresher, okay? It will give you a lot of business knowledge that you don't have as someone who maybe studied engineering. Do you want to pivot your career? Okay, if that's the case, like we discussed right now, you maybe have been working in industry A, B, C, and now you want to get into consulting, an MBA can be a great tool to do so. Do you need to add prestige to your CV? Is there only freaking Mickey Mouse companies on your CV and now you need something that, has a bit of firepower, it's a bit more prestigious? Then, yeah, try to get into one of these big ass MBA programs. My personal situation is, I told you at the beginning, right? I told you a very personal story about the fact that I thought I don't want to do my master's. I'm immediately going to join a company after my bachelor's degree, and maybe I'll do an MBA at some point. Now, is it too late for me to do an MBA at this point? No, I could still do an MBA. The fact is just that it's going too well. Okay, so you also do an MBA if things are kind of bumpy, if you feel like you're stagnating in your career, you feel like you need to pivot it, you need to freshen things up a little bit. For me, that's not the case. It's going very well. I'm super happy with the progress I've made in the past 3, 4, 5 years. So for me to do an MBA would be kind of an interruption that's unnecessary, that costs a lot of money, and that doesn't yield any long-term career benefits. So even though I kind of would like to do an MBA because it's a nice, it really, I think, is a nice experience that can be very, that can be full of learnings. It doesn't really make sense in my case right now. Maybe in the future. Or maybe it's going to be an executive MBA when I get even older. And then lastly, some of y'all are working in very specific industries. What you can try, okay, is you apply for this expert angle. So, for example, I know a couple of peeps who worked in the consumer goods industry, at big consumer goods companies. Like P&G, for example, Procter & Gamble, and they worked there sufficiently long enough. So it's not enough to just work there for 1 year, but let's say 3, 4, 5 years. Then you suddenly, you get that consumer goods stamp. So people are like, okay, this person worked at Procter & Gamble for a couple of years. They probably know a thing or two about the consumer goods industry. That's when you can apply for the expert angle at a consulting firm. So you apply there, you say, hey, I've done nothing else my whole life than consumer goods. Please hire me. And then you'll probably get like a senior consultant position on one of their consumer goods teams. Of course, if you're further along, you're senior management in one of these highly specialized industries, then you could even become a partner, but I think few of you are at this stage in your career. Now, if you want to do an MBA, you somehow need to select your university, and there's things that you need to pay attention to, like the rankings, target universities, you can talk to people, blah blah blah. All of these things have been discussed in my video, how to plan and build your career as an ambitious person complete course. So look for it. It's another 1.5, almost 2-hour video, I think. As I said, this is the video that I would let 16-year-old, 17, 18-year-old Kevin watch in order to get him up to speed and make him know everything that 28-year-old Kevin knows. So I think it's beneficial for you to watch that. If you don't watch it, it's your fault, okay? Next point, interview process. Not going to waste too much time here, but if you want to get into consulting, there's a very predictable interview process. You have brain teasers, case studies, and personal fit. Parts of the interview, brain teasers, is dumb stuff like how many bowling balls can you fit in an A380 Airbus, you know, or into a Boeing 747, whatever. And then you need to, like, it's not about giving them a specific number, it's more about what kind of process can you come up with in order to determine a close approximation to this answer, to this problem. Case studies, you can read about that all in the internet. There are so many case study books out there. Again, if I would prepare for case studies, I would first, you know, try to learn the basics, read a couple of books, don't spend too much time on that, and proceed with practical case studies as soon as possible. And ideally, you get someone like myself or someone like your friends who have worked in consulting to do a couple of case studies with you first, so that you get into the habit, you know, you internalize these good habits. Then you can practice a couple of case studies with some losers or some people who are also trying to get into consulting, and then maybe 1 or 2 days before your interviews, you do another couple of case studies with people who really know what they're doing. Personal fit, obviously how you fit into the firm personally, yeah, maybe some, I mean, because you can read about this stuff online, and I'm not able to add a lot of value here, but one thing that I want to add is how many weeks or months in advance you should prepare for that. And it's really weeks or months. So I would say if you start preparing for if you start preparing for case studies or your interviews 1 or 2 weeks before, that's not enough, man. I would try to start preparing 2 months prior, you know, slowly start preparing, getting into the mindset of thinking about case studies, thinking about you encounter real life economic problems, right? If you just open the newspaper, there's literally hundreds of case studies inside of that. And I want you to be in the state of mind a couple of weeks before your interviews with these big consulting firms where you are thinking like that. Like, you open the newspaper, you start thinking, hey, you know, that's actually a case. How would I solve it? Same thing if you, you go to a sausage shop or a restaurant. You start calculating the revenues. You know, you're sitting there and suddenly this question pops up in your mind. I wonder what's their daily revenue. I wonder what's their bottom line. And then you start calculating, and that's a thinking process you want to be in. That's a state of mind that I'm in more or less all the time. So I do these calculations often, simply because these questions pop up in my mind. And then it's a nice little challenge to, challenge myself to come up with an approximation. Okay, and before I leave you, I want to give you the 4 factors that will decide about whether or not you will get your dream job. And maybe that's consulting, maybe that's something else, maybe it's investment banking, or now you got inspired by my angel investor journey, we want to get into venture capital or something else. There are really just 4 factors, and that's your universities, your grades, your internships, and your extracurriculars. Okay, these are the 4 things. If you can get those right, you can get into any job you want. And there's a nice message in there, which is, if you screw up your grades a little bit, I mean, if you completely screw them up, you're damned, right? But if just a little bit, you're not in the top 10% or top 20% of your class, it's okay. There's still hope, You have 4 factors. So each one can compensate for the other one, all right? But what you shouldn't do is screw something up completely. Like, no internships at all? Nah. Even if you're the top 1%, it's probably not gonna get you into your dream job, all right? And then on top of that, you have a couple of soft factors, which you also need to develop, which quite conveniently you can do by just focusing on these 4 factors. So for example, your internships, if you get the right internships, you go to the right companies, and you follow the advice that, for example, I gave you already a couple of times, then you're also going to learn these soft factors during those internships. And then I had this discussion a couple of times now with people that I coached. I actually had this phone call just 1 week ago with one of my mentees, and he's trying to get into a job. In his case, he's looking at consulting actually. He doesn't have the typical consulting profile, so what he did is he created a huge ass Excel list where he's going to track his networking process. So he's going to contact a couple of people on LinkedIn every day. He's going to send me this Excel list, I think twice a week for accountability purposes. And he's just going to do very effective and structured networking, you know, reaching out to these people, providing value as a student, and trying to connect with them. And that's a great way to build up a network. And that's sometimes how you can skip this first hurdle, which is getting an interview. You know, because maybe you did screw up your grades, okay? Then the only way for you to compensate that and get the interview nevertheless is through good, effective networking. And then mind you, you still need to nail the interviews, right? You still need to nail them, but you got through that first hurdle. Now, you know, we could go more into depth on how to get good grades, or how to do the right internships. All of these things are discussed in my video, how to plan and build your career as an ambitious person. Already talked about it a couple of times. Also how to do extracurriculars, how to get the extracurriculars that actually count. This is it. I haven't kept track of the time, but I have been talking for quite a long time. I hope this is valuable to you. I'm definitely going to do videos that dive into other topics. You know, I mean, I've worked in management consulting, but I've also worked in the VC industry. I'm doing angel investing myself. One of them I told you about throughout this video that I sold on Flipper, networking, working towards liquidity events, and getting that sweet ultra high net worth individual status. All of these things I want to discuss with you, and I want to go a little bit deeper. I will also still do, you know, the videos that you're used to. So, you know, 10-minute long videos, 15-minute long videos about, for example, these business titans. That's something I'm passionate about. I remember, I mean, I was screwing around on YouTube for a very long time already, right? I had, for example, I'm not sure many of you know, but I had a beauty channel. When I was like 15, I started literally a beauty channel. So I was telling other boys how to take care of their skin, you know, how to style their hair and so on. That was kind of a trend back then, and I got quite popular with that because no other boys were doing that, right? It was all girls, you know, giving makeup advice and so on. And then kind of, what a surprise, I got less passionate about that as I grew older, as I became more of the silverback that you see in front of the camera today. So I just stopped. But long story short, I have been around on YouTube for some time. And what my goal actually was at some point, I remember when I was like 18, 19, and I was starting to get extremely fascinated by these business titans, you know, guys like Warren Buffett or Steven Schwartzman, Henry Kravis, and so on. Started reading about them, and I thought to myself, why the hell don't more people learn from them instead of learning from all these bullshit gurus you have on the web? And back then, I know it was a real pain. I mean, I was going through this self-improvement process, and in this self-improvement niche, you have so many bullshitters, you know, trying to sell you some courses, trying to tell you how to get rich easily and overnight. And I was like, there needs to be a service that brings these real titans closer to everyone, you know, so that all these average people, they don't get schooled by average freaking gurus, but they start learning from the best of the best. And I screwed around a little bit, tried, like that was one of the tries to build a side venture back then. This one was one that failed. But long story short, it's kind of close to my heart to bring these business lessons from real titans to you, so that you can learn from them, and you don't learn from, you know, average people, but you learn from the best. You learn from the real silverback baitman giga chads out there. A status that we all aspire towards. And that's, by the way, also what this community, I mean, this Patreon community on Discord that I started is all about, right? Some of you might be angry because I think you need to pay, what, 15 bucks or so to get in? But the truth is, if you don't put a price tag on things like that, you attract a lot of trash, you know? You're going to have a community with 1,000 people, but just 1% of those is active. And then you have 10% of those who are just writing bullshit comments that nobody wants to read. There needs to be a little bit of exclusivity. And I didn't really want to rant about the price, but what I really wanted to say is I'm extremely happy for this community, you know, because each and every one there, I think we're like 100 people, not more. And I know everyone who's been around there for more than a couple of months. I know them well. I know what they're doing. I know what they're pursuing. And it's just nice to support each other. It's like a little club. So let's keep working towards these megalomaniacal goals. Stay childish, stay hungry.